Yes, thank you very much, John. On behalf of the Mackenzie Institute, I'd like to thank you and Jen and CEO Global Network members for the opportunity that we have to work with you to bring speakers of the caliber and quality of Dr. Coxon to the group. I'd like to now go into a little bit of a description of what the Mackenzie Institute is. The Mackenzie Institute is a globally recognized, independent, not-for-profit, Canadian-based public policy institute researching and commenting on issues impacting political and social stability. Over the past 30 years, specific attention has been given to terrorism, crime, organized violence, energy security, food security, financial system security, cybersecurity, and international conflicts which can impact on Canadian security. The Institute brings a strategic and pragmatic approach to security matters. We provide insightful information for policymakers, governments, and private sector interests and educational institutions. May we suggest, when you have a moment, to go to www.mackenzieinstitute.com to see interesting articles and perhaps acquire a timely and relevant book on security matters. As we are an independent registered charity, we welcome donations and sponsorships. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Deputy Chief of Police, Dr. Shawna Coxon. Dr. Coxon is currently in charge of the Communities and Neighbourhoods Command, which includes all 16 police divisions of the City of Toronto. Prior to that, Dr. Coxon commanded the Services Priority Response Command, where she led some 2,800 people with a budget of $330 million. Among many other command assignments, Dr. Coxon was a proud member of the Transformational Task Force, leading IT and training modernization, as well as the co-lead for organizational culture change. She is most known for having implemented the service's inaugural computer cyber crime section known as C3. As John mentioned, we're going to have a rare opportunity to have a live Q&A with Dr. Coxon. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Coxon. And Dr. Coxon, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me here. And good morning from Toronto, because I know there's people from all different places on the call. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to come and have this conversation with me today. And I do hope that it's a conversation. For me, I'm sure many of you feel the same. Time is the most precious commodity I have. It's harder and harder to stretch these days. So I do appreciate everyone taking an hour and spending it here with me. So this week is actually Police Week, and that's why I'm excited that the Mackenzie Institute asked me to come and speak with all of you. The Ontario theme for Police Week is Leading the Way to Safer Communities, a fascinating theme which was mapped out before COVID. And I say this because COVID has certainly changed the landscape of policing in everywhere, but in Toronto, certainly we've seen this from my experience. And one of the things I want you to think about, although it's not the topic of that we're going to discuss today, is the idea that modernization through disruption, all the things we've been talking about for years in our sector, and it hasn't really moved forward until COVID hit. So when COVID hit, it forced us to rapidly modernize and change many of our processes in ways that no one anticipated. So it's really driven some incredible opportunities. And of course, we need to be mindful of the kind of threats that have emerged because of COVID-19. I have a slide deck that I'm going to go through, and I'm going to share it with you all, but I want you to know that the slide deck is very dense, which is not normally how I operate. And it's because I just think there's so much content in it, and I wasn't sure what level everyone is at. Certainly, many of you may find it too low level, and others may find it just there's too much information, and you may have trouble keeping up. But my intention is to share the deck with everyone, so I won't go through it all, and I'll pick off some high-level themes from it that I think you need to be thinking about from a crime prevention standpoint. We have seen changes in crime patterns. This is an international trajectory that is no different than Toronto. So for example, certain types of calls are down. Break-and enters to homes are down because people are home. It's much more difficult. Break-and enters into commercial operations are up because people are looking for the opportunity that they can't have now with respect to access to residential properties. And a lot of those commercial buildings are closed. So this has created an opportunity, and we've seen that trajectory in a little bit of a different way than we've seen prior to this. Robberies are also up because people are desperate for money. And domestics are up. You may have heard this around the world. This is a trend we've also seen. The other thing that you really need to be mindful of is certainly cybercrime is way up. And again, it's international. It's not just in Toronto, but you know, criminals realize that people are working from home. Many people do not have the infrastructure to work from home because it was done on the fly. Many companies sent their people home and then tried to ratify whatever security protocols would be needed either on the fly or after they went home. And this gave access to networks. That opportunity is something that cyber criminals around the world are leveraging and continuing to leverage. We certainly have seen intelligence around the fact that many people are being encouraged to commit these types of crimes. And you know, data these days, as of 3 years ago, is a more profitable entity than oil. And that's even more so now in the world of COVID. So these are the general high-level themes that we're seeing. So certainly as CEOs of companies having to deal with commercial enterprises, having to deal with trying to assist your employees who are working remotely, who may not be thinking about things in the same robust way you might think about when you're at the office, these are creating opportunities for cyber criminals. So I'm just going to share with you my slide deck. If you just give me one moment. All right, there we go. And we'll just make our way through it. Oh. Okay, so this is what we're going to go through today. And I'm not going to go through all these things in detail. As I said, I'm going to keep it very high level, being mindful of everyone's time and very much wanting to have more of a conversation with everyone when this is done. But we're going to talk a little bit about cybercrime, a little bit about residential crime prevention. I'm going to speak about that at a very high level because the kinds of prevention principles that I'm going to go through can certainly be leveraged regardless of the asset you're trying to protect, whether that's residential or commercial. And then I'm going to talk about stuff that's more related to business premises. Again, these things can carry over even if it's a commercial property. And then I'm going to share with you some links to information so you can get more information if you would like it after the fact. All right, so cybercrime, let's jump right in. So people are working from home and they may not be thinking about what that means. I'll give you an example. My neighbor is working from home. He's with an insurance company. He'll probably never go back to the office again because there's tremendous opportunity being identified by businesses who realize that much more of their work can be done remotely than they may have anticipated before. I asked him, what have you done to secure your Wi-Fi at home? As an example. He had no idea what I was talking about. So when you're sending your employees to work remotely, particularly when it's been done in a rush with respect to COVID, you're gonna wanna give them some information about what they need to be doing to make sure that everything they're doing is secure. So that means securing your computer, your phone, and your Wi-Fi connections. With respect to Wi-Fi, you start there looking at what the encryptions are. Has the software system on that and the computer been updated, or are you using the most recent software system? And then looking at things like what's the encryption level and what does that mean? Where are they downloading apps on their computer and their phone? Are they able to download apps from sources that might be a bit sketchy? And have you given them direction on how to deal with that? Because people aren't even thinking about it. Passwords, I would suggest that if you've sent people home for COVID working remotely, ask them to change their password, give them that direction, make them stronger, make them new and more robust, because these are things people just are not thinking about. Make sure that they've got malware systems to deal with spyware. So and you know, if it's a work computer, you will have done this already. But in some cases, I've spoken to business owners in the city of Toronto who just didn't have enough computers to send home with people. So now people are using their own computers. This creates an incredible opportunity for cyber criminals. Remind people to deal with emails and social media in a way that is safe. You don't want to be opening things where you don't know where it's from. I mean, this stuff is really simple, but people aren't thinking about the increased level of risk because they may be dealing with data at home that has to do with private information. And so when I say protect your data, certain files, you're going to want to be encrypted. You're going to want to give direction on what that encryption should look like and tell people how to do it, as well as asking people to make sure they're not sharing information about their identity on online sources in a way that they shouldn't be, in particularly around social media, of course, because people share everything on social media. And this gives criminals opportunities to send files that may look like they're from a trusted source when they're not. Lastly, during COVID, I would be dusting off any kind of plan you have in terms of how to deal with cybercrime. Because if something happens, it may be different than what you've seen before. I would also be looking at whatever systems you have internally with respect to your own business. So talking to your security company, talking to your IT security, and making sure that everything is up to speed. Because again, there may not be as many people actually, reviewing your network and looking at your logs to make sure that everything is okay. And again, tremendous opportunity right now for cyber criminals. This is a checklist that I'm just sharing with you. Again, very high level, but it's from Interpol. And Interpol is an international police agency. So this is based on international trends. And again, what we're seeing in Toronto certainly is reflecting what's happening internationally. And so I just wanted to make sure that you had that and that you have Interpol as a reference in case you ever want to take a look at the kind of material that they put out there. Residential crime prevention. So these are actually down right now during COVID. As I said, most people are home and this is not creating the same level of opportunity. Having said that, I'm going to go through 10 high-level prevention principles that you can use. And you may want to think about this with respect to your families. Certainly, we've seen new anxieties from employees. Policing is a bit different because police officers, have certain types of anxieties and our civilians have other types of anxieties. And it's not that they don't overlap, but their concerns are often different given their role. But it's very interesting to see how people are dealing with anxieties with respect to families at home, whether it's concern over possible risk of contamination, or whether it's concern about the fact that you may have members who are at home and one person is still working and actually going out to work, leaving someone else at home who's not used to being home for extended periods of time. So these are things that may help to reduce anxiety just by target hardening your home. So target hardening is really just looking at any property you have, whether it's commercial, residential, and looking at whether or not you have to think like an offender and decide whether or not they have opportunities to get in. So you want to be looking at things like locks, the kind of doors and windows you have, the kind of systems you have, and I actually put cybercrime into this as well. What kind of security levels do you have around cyber? And looking at whether or not there are opportunities for people to break in, looking at things that are just outside the property, for example, sheds, and seeing whether or not there are tools that could be used to give people access. And that might even mean breaking a window, but what kind of opportunities are you leaving out there for people? These kinds of tips I'm not going to go through, but they're in the slide deck, and it's one of the reasons I'm sharing it with you so that you can have an opportunity to think about it. If you say, I have no idea what an offender would look at, these kinds of tips will show you, think about things like lighting and, storage, that kind of thing, and it'll help you, guide you in terms of looking at how to target harden. Target removal is very simple and straightforward. Just don't have things out that people would want to steal, particularly in areas where they can be seen. If this is a commercial property, what do people see when they look in a window? Have you secured the windows? We've seen businesses in Toronto boarding up windows, and next week some of them will be opening, and so they're taking them down. But if you have a car that's outside, very typical case in a residential scenario, you have your car outside and you have valuables in the car. We talk about at Christmas not leaving gifts in the car, shopping bags where people see gifts that you just purchased at the mall. This is target removal. Just make sure that there's nothing out that would tempt someone to want to break in to anything that you're trying to secure. Removing the means to commit crime. So I'm going to jump back to what I talk about with respect to a shed. Simple things. You've got a shed outside, and that gives access to things like ladders, tools that can then be used against you as someone breaks into your house. So just really looking at what kind of means exist, what kind of things are you leaving around that might allow for people to get into your properties. Reducing the payoff just means that you need to be able to secure valuables. I would hope that with reduced staffing levels at various businesses, and in some cases businesses are closed and shuttered, that property has been put away, cash has been put away, and there's no opportunity there for an offender that would want to break in. Access control. So this is interesting because it's something that's great to think about with respect not just to COVID, but after COVID. Who are you giving access to? And again, remember that during COVID, we're often giving access to people that we may not have before. Did you bring in extra cleaning staff? Who are they? How are they vetted? What are the protocols when they're in place? You know, who's with them when they're going through your properties? What does your locking system look like now that somebody may not be in a premise that used to always have someone at it? So really just looking at who has access, how do you ensure that access is monitored and regulated, and making sure that you're not allowing people in for an opportunity that may just give them you know, the chance to commit a crime. Surveillance. So, you know, a lot of people have CCTV cameras, other types of cameras. We recommend having cameras. I would recommend that during this time of COVID that you look at the operating system for your cameras. Is it up to date? Is it the most recent operating system? I can't tell you the number of times we go and deal with a commercial property that thinks they have an incredible system and something is wrong, they can't access it, or you know they didn't realize what the rate of getting rid of the video footage was. And so again, if a property's been sitting vacant for a week and you go in and you want to retrieve footage because you think someone has broken in and you just don't know when they've broken in, but you know you have it set to re-record every 24 hours. These are the kinds of things we see. So you want to make sure that your surveillance system is up to date, that if you're not going to be at a premise for a long period of time, that data will be saved so that it's not gone if you want to review it back in time. Making sure that you're actually looking at the property, what kind of things may block the view of the property, again, creating an opportunity, and making sure that you really know who's around your property and who you can rely on if you need to go to someone in terms of who's been around. Environmental change, just again, it's really just looking at your property and seeing what's there. Are there footpaths that you should maybe be closing? We talked already about fences. What kinds of things obscure the view of windows and doors? And really just looking at those kinds of opportunities. And again, the reason it says environmental change is sometimes they change depending on the season. I had a family member who had a tree outside the house, and in the summertime when it was beautiful and luscious, it obscured the door. And in fact, the only break and enter they've ever had into their house was someone physically kicking in the door in the middle of the day on a street where many people are home during the day, and no one was able to see it because of that beautiful lush tree, which was pruned after that, I can tell you. So these are just things you may not think about that are important. Rule setting, this again goes into access. And again, I would really be looking at all of my rules, governance and procedures with respect to anything that's changed during COVID, particularly if you have people working from home, who has access to what data, what kind of rules have you set around that, who has access to your physical property, again, what are the protocols that you have around that, and really dusting off or creating new protocols on the fly. I can tell you we've even had to do that in policing over the last couple months, and it's been really important to successfully getting through COVID. Last thing is deflecting offenders, and really this is just making it look like someone's there if they're not, making it look like this is not an attractive target, looking at the area where your business is. Are there particular problems in that area? Are there issues with youth, for example, where you may want to contact your local police service or contact groups that are working with youth in the community and get involved? That's just a very specific example, but there's lots more. So you want to look at ways to deflect so that you don't have offenders finding your particular property a target, an attractive target. Deadbolt locks, again, I'm going to leave this as information for you in this slide deck, but there are big differences in locks. You want to make sure that you have a lock that actually cannot be drilled and cannot be overcome. I would really look at whether or not your commercial locks are linked to the internet. Again, in the time of cybercrime and the increases we've seen in that, that's a tremendous opportunity for people to get access to your physical space if they can hack your lock. So we certainly always recommend one that doesn't link to Wi-Fi. You also want to be looking at other things that link to Wi-Fi. There's a very famous case of a hack being done through a temperature regulator in a fish tank that was linked to the main system of a major corporation. And they got access to that network through the temperature gauge in the fish tank. That case has been replicated. I've seen it replicated by various different companies out there, but it just shows you how small things can actually make you quite vulnerable, and you want to be thinking about these things. Strike plates, of course, are very helpful, and I would recommend this at your home as well. It just makes it difficult to kick in doors. It's that much harder to get in. The example I gave of a family member in my life, they wouldn't have been able to kick in the door if there had been a strike plate on that door. I'm going to leave, as I said, these things as reference for you. The next thing is window security. Again, you want to be looking at your physical space and seeing whether or not it makes sense to have windows nailed down. If you're not going to be there for an extended period of time during COVID, you want to have them boarded up. Can people get access to your windows? You can also buy high impact acrylics to go over windows that make them more difficult to smash in. So this is something you may want to be thinking about, particularly with commercial premises. And then the last thing for both home and business is really just knowing who your neighbors are so that they'll call you if they see an issue and you will call them as well. It's an amazing target hardening technique, actually. It's just knowing who it is that's around your home and your business and who you can call if something is amiss. And that's, again, dovetailing right into suspicious activity. Sometimes difficult to tell during COVID, right? Because, you know, what's happening out there in the world is different now. There's less people around. People might be hovering around for bona fide reasons that would have looked strange 2 months ago. So again, just kind of knowing who should be around, who your neighbors are, and just trying to identify if there's an issue ahead of time. Lastly, I'm just going to leave this for you again, other tips for you to consider. And then I'm going to go right through to our business opportunities. Now, before I get into that, I will mention this. I talked about having a cybercrime plan. Whether it's your home or your business, you really need to have a plan for if there is a break and enter. We're getting break and enters into places that right now have no one there that would typically have people around. Some of the things we're seeing are trends, for example, in theft of vehicles, but new vehicles that are on lots because there's no one in those lots. Theft of from places like storage facilities because they typically had staff around and now they don't. So people have a lot of time and opportunity. So what do you have in your business in terms of a plan if something happens? And is it robust enough to ensure that if someone's not around for a while, it's still a meaningful plan and we may be able to get evidence, which will be important to the police. At every police station, it doesn't matter whether you're in Toronto or not, they're going to have a divisional crime prevention unit that you can call. So just be aware of who that is for you in your world, both where you live and where your business is. And you can call them in advance to come and help you with some of the things that I'm discussing, like target hardening, etc. So please feel free to reach out to them. I'm going through a lot of information really quickly, and that's why I'm going to share the deck with you because I don't expect people to remember a lot. But it's always nice to have someone come by on a face-to-face. Even if you're social distancing, you can still do it and have someone give you some feedback on your specific property. More resources for you. Now, business. A lot of this pertains to when businesses are open, but I still think it's meaningful because we are going into an interesting, and I'm going to say potentially vulnerable time, because people are going to be socially distancing. So some of your security protocols are going to be different. Again, your staff is not going to know if something is off because everything feels off right now. I'm sure we're all feeling that way. So you need to think about, again, sitting down with your staff and talking to them about keeping themselves safe in terms of risk of infection, but also just what's normal and what do we expect of people. You want to greet people when they come into a premise. That's also so you can get a read on everyone that's coming into your property and making sure that they know that you've seen them as well, and taking a look at what they're there for. So it's good customer service, and it's also really good for security as well. Visibility, and I'm going to get into just reminding again about the importance of not having obstruction in front of your windows, your doors, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that as we go along. But the counter space, if you have a register, anywhere you keep cash, anywhere you keep anything that is valuable, depending on what your business is, you want to make sure that you have a clear line of sight so that other people and not just one employee can see who should be getting access to that and making sure that it's safe. So controlling access, we talked about this already a little bit, and video equipment, but again, really, really important as businesses start to open up. Who has access to the property? How often are they there? What are the protocols around that? And then your video equipment. When is it set to re-record over? Are you using the most current operating system? Who has access to it? Those kinds of things. Now, this is important because a lot of our businesses are closed. So you want to make sure that locks, alarms, cameras, that they're operational. You're going to want to continue to make sure they're operational even as you're at home. You want to make sure you're taking things out of the view of any potential criminals, so out of the windows. We've had smash and grabs in the city, so you want to make sure that you're not giving that opportunity. Business documentation, is it all backed up? Particularly if you have people who are working from home. You know, you've got your employees working from home. What's backed up and how is that information being accessed? Who has access to it during these difficult times? Okay, so alarms, cameras, what is the update on your inventory and where it is? You want to make sure that that, again, very unusual because a lot of stores are having extra inventory because they're still receiving shipments, but they're not open. And I'm telling you that criminals know this right now. It's something that's being openly discussed on social media. Knowing your business neighbors, going and checking on the property, you know, when you need to, and in between when you need to, if you will, just to make sure everything is okay. And again, really making sure that those high value items aren't anywhere that's visible and they're secured, potentially even in a different location or in a safe somewhere where it can be managed while no one is there. So being alert, being aware, and being visible, very important. Looking at how you handle cash, again, making sure all of that is secure. This is openings and closings for businesses when we're back to work and back to things being open, but those are just things I'm leaving with you to consider. And again, what to do if there is an issue. Clear zone is just I'm going to reiterate what I've said before, which is just that it's really important to have a clear line of sight, particularly to your employees who you want to keep safe, and also to valuables. So anywhere there's a register, anywhere there's cash, anywhere that there's something that is of value, you want to make sure that it can be seen from the street even, because witnesses help you and it makes it less attractive for an offender. So if you take a look at this window, this is not good, this window. This is a problem because everything inside that location is obscured. That's a problem. So what you want is something like this, where everything from the waist level up, it gives a clear line of sight into that location. You can see what employees are doing. Similarly, employees can see people on the street if they need to call for help. It just gives you an extra layer of what we call target hardening to make sure that offenders don't find this as interesting a target. Now, here's some contact information with respect to Toronto, but certainly 911 and Crime Stoppers are available right across the country. Very useful tips to be able to get information even above and beyond what I'm sharing. There's some useful information here as well. And again, the rest of this deck I'm just going to leave for you as things that you can consider if you want to look at online reporting, working with Crime Stoppers, anything like that. And so that's the end of my slide deck. I really wanted to make today more of a conversation, and I don't know about you, but I have trouble listening to someone go through slides for an extended period of time. And so I thought I would end it there and give opportunities for discussion. Thank you so much. There's my contact information if any of you want to reach me beyond this. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Shawna. That was outstanding. Practical tips, ideas on how to protect, as you say, both our personal and our business assets, our family and our employees. Boy, there's a lot of great ideas there that, you know, I took a lot of notes in terms of ideas that we can implement here that'll help secure our property for sure. So thank you for those. Really appreciate that. We are going to open it up to questions now. And, you know, if you've got a question, just hit that chat button or you know, put it in the chat box if you like, But I know we have a question already, and Mitch, I did see your note, so I'm going to call on Mitch Foray. And Mitch, perhaps, and this is to everybody, when you're putting your question to Shawna, if you could just a brief introduction, and then ask your question. Okay. So thank you very much. Over to you, Mitch. Remember that mute button, Mitch?
Hi, I'm just unmuting. Hi, I'm Mitch Ferris. I am a speaker and a corporate trainer, and I run a company that does training globally. And I had the misfortune of being hacked yesterday. My business email was hacked, so this is timely for me. By the way, if anyone on this call received an email from me with a link to click on, please don't click on that link. Dr. Coxon, I have sent out follow-up emails to everyone who received an email from me, which was one simply nothing more than an update in the title and a link to click on. And, you know, my IT folks caught it fairly early on, but it did get out to over 800 people. And I followed up with all of them with a follow-up email saying, please disregard, please don't click on the link. Are there other steps that I should be taking today, knowing that 800 plus emails went out to people yesterday from my email account?
And is this email account, I think you said it's a business account, so this includes clients as well, yes?
Correct.
Yeah. So what I would do, and it's more of a business piece than that, I would wait a couple of days and I would send an email out explaining the security protocols you've taken, not in detail, but the things that you have done on your side to secure yourself, just to reassure them that doing business with you is worthwhile still, because you take this very seriously, you take their cybersecurity very seriously, and that you've engaged in key steps. I think sharing that is important because people then begin to wonder what's happened here, how did this happen to begin with? So just reassuring them that you know that their cybersecurity is important, and it's important to you as someone that they do business with, and that you've taken these steps to ensure their safety.
Wow, that's helpful. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Very good. Thanks for the question, Mitch. And any other questions, you know, for Shawna at this point before I call on somebody to volunteer? Any other questions? Just let me know. Either wave your hand if you can, or whatever. But just before, I wanted to, Jean-Louis Brennick-Meyer, would it be unfair of me to kind of call on you for a question of Shawna? And then I wondered, Adam Rashawn, if you're still with us, if I could call on you. And I have a couple of other questions coming in now. So, Jean-Louis, is it fair to call on you for a question or a comment about Shawna's presentation?
So, good morning, Shawna. My name is Jean-Louis Brennick-Meyer. I'm founder and president of Little Canada, a attraction taking guests on a journey of discovery through Canada in miniature. We're opening at 10 Dundas, so on the northeast side of Young Dundas Square. Very excited about the location. You're no doubt very well aware of the surroundings of Young Dundas, and just wanted to ask you if you've got any tips that we should be thinking about when we do open in the fall, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And by the way, that's a spectacular location. I mean, good for you for getting it. What I would say is two things. There's a very strong BIA in that sector because the challenges there are unique. I would plug into them. They're going to be an incredible resource for you. In addition, we have a very robust neighborhood officer team working out of 52 Division. You're 10 Dundas, so you're on the, it'll be 52 Division. So if you call 416-808-5200, which is the main line for 52 Division, and ask to speak to the neighborhood officers for your area, for Yonge and Dundas, and have them come by. Meet them. They do proactive work in that area. So they're out on bikes and on foot every day. There's two teams. When one team's on, the other team is not. But you want to get to know your neighborhood officers. They can help you with all manner of problems proactively. That's why they're there. And I can tell you that's a fantastic team working out of that area. So those are two organizations, if you will, that you're going to want to plug into for sure.
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And Erez, I wanted to call on you. I know you have a question for Dr. Coxon. So Erez, over to you for your question. And maybe just a quick introduction of you and your business.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erez Zavlanov, CEO of MIT Consulting, a IT outsourcing firm and cybersecurity firm. Definitely, Doctor, you nailed it on the head. I would say from our experience, we've seen a uptick of almost threefold of where it was pre-COVID from data breaches and whatever not. My biggest challenge I'm having right now is getting through people's heads to deal with this now, because I'm forecasting that when people are going to go back to work and they're actually able to address regular business, that's when the cybercrime is really going to start peaking, in the sense that they've gotten your data, they're sitting with your passwords, they're waiting for you to get to your desk. And then you guys are going to say, the city's going to say, okay, we're back to business. Now, all of a sudden, all your data is held for ransom, and we need, hundreds of thousands of dollars in ransomware. The problem I'm having right now, I'm looking for some advice, is how do you convey this to business owners today when they're just trying to deal with the current lockdown? And then when you start talking to them about cybersecurity and taking proactive measures on this, they're sitting there going, well, I'm faced with trying to get masks right now and dealing with this transition, and I don't want to spend more money on trying to figure out how to secure my environment when I know when they're going to get back, we're going to see cyber breaches through the roof. It's just going to be insane on what's going to happen in that respect.
So I would consider two things. I do agree with you. I think intruders are sitting on networks, they're waiting for the opportunity, and we're going to see that certainly when people go back to work. Because the opportunities like now are like we've never seen before, right?
Correct.
I would do two things. People are feeling very overwhelmed right now, and I get that. So what I would do is maybe prime them with information from other people. So we put out a very quick YouTube video with the head of our cybercrime team talking about the uptick. So it's not just you saying it. Certainly there's been international media. I was interviewed about a week ago by someone from Forbes in the UK talking about this very issue. So he's got articles out there. So you'll find articles that you can just kind of send to people. But the other thing I think you can do to add value to your customers, because many of them just aren't going to listen to you. I actually think it's an emotional thing. People are just very emotionally overwhelmed. Again, they're worried about their employees and their employees getting sick, and they just can't handle anything more. I would package together a plan of what to do in case of an attack. With your company on board, and showing that leadership in advance, so that later it's not just a matter of I told you so. It's a matter of, we looked out for you in advance. We created the plan. Here is the plan, because unfortunately many of you are going to need it. You don't think you are, but here it is, because we're here for you even in advance. I think that sends a strong message.
Okay, great. And so the materials you're mentioning about, is that something that you guys are releasing somewhere? Can I reach out to you to point me in that?
Yeah, we did it as a news release. It's on my Twitter. But if you reach out to me, I can certainly send you the link to the YouTube video. And there's, like I said, you'll see there's a number of articles that have been written by very reputable international newspapers and blogs talking about this very issue. So I'm confident that you can easily find a couple of articles. You don't want to overwhelm people, but just to show we know this is an issue, and we're seeing it here in Toronto, and it's an international trend. So people are aware. So I would prime them with that, and then have a plan for them that you share in advance, so that after the fact, they're feeling like you had their back even before they recognized what a problem it is.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I wanted to call on Dave Hardy next. Dave, I know you've got a question, and then I was going to call on you, Brennan. But Dave, could you just pose your question and just a quick self-intro, and then over to Shawna.
Yeah, thanks, John. I am the president of Hardy Stevenson Associates Limited. We've been around Canada for 30 years. We're a planning and engineering firm. I do have some staff coming to now a home office, but I have many companies working for us. My concern is, or my question is, I'm seeing increasing numbers of homeless and expect people using drugs in some of the ravines that are close to where my staff have to work. And in these times, I'm just wondering what my temperature level should be. Should I just leave it alone, or should I be a bit nervous and call City of Toronto Homeless Group, or is this something where I should call the police?
I would actually, I don't think there's more homeless right now. I think we're seeing them more because they're very visible, because there's not people on the street in the same way. I do think that we're going to see an increase in homelessness with all of the layoffs. There's a lot of people who are very vulnerable right now. I can tell you the city has done a ton of work on this, and they're actually working to try to secure rooms for the homeless to try to get them off the street. It's actually City of Toronto bylaw who's dealing with the homeless issue right now. I can tell you that there's protocols around whether someone is staying in a tent or not, and who gets access to shelters first based on their level of vulnerability. And so I know that it's something that's concerning and you want to be of assistance. Police would be the last resort if there was an issue around you're being concerned for someone's safety or that you think a crime is going to be committed. Otherwise, I would be speaking with the city and their bylaw people around your options, because they've put in different protocols because of COVID, including a real push to try to find housing for those who need it. The other challenge that we're seeing with respect to COVID is, of course, people who are living on the street, they're not able to socially distance, their immune systems are often compromised for a whole bunch of reasons. So they're a really vulnerable community right now that's suffering greatly medically from what's happened with COVID. So I would be working with the city to see how you can deal with it in a way that is consistent with what they're trying to do.
Good, thank you. Thanks, Dave, for that question. And now I'd like to go to Brennan. Brennan, you have a question, and I just want to give Susan Fulford a heads up. Hi, Susan. We're going to come to you after we hear from Brennan. Okay, over to you, Brennan.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Coxon. That was a great presentation. Lots of great tidbits that I too was taking mental note of. We seem to be sharing quite a bit of information online. And what I mean by that is I see my friends posting a lot about early childhood memories and all this other stuff, reminiscing. But it seems to me like this just makes them and us who are taking part in those conversations targets for social engineering exercises. So any resources or any sort of recommendations on how to kind of help stop the spread, if you will, of these exercises that could be used for nefarious purposes?
Yeah, I think the only thing you can do is do exactly what you're doing now, which is have the conversations. People do not understand how easy it is to take your identity. And, I've even had this challenge where people create fake email accounts using my name because I'm out there, I'm online, and my job requires that I be out there. But the sharing of information is really problematic. And I actually think because people are having to stay inside, what are they doing? They're on their computers and their phones all the time. This is how they're interacting with others. This is how they're sharing and collaborating during times of anxiety and grief because you're trapped inside with everything that's happening right now. So I think these conversations are really important. Certainly, there's a number of things like clicking on, taking these surveys on Facebook. We all know that's how they're accessing information. That information is being reappropriated for other uses. Most people are just not aware. So I think, educating them, and I got to tell you, educating your friends personally, like person to person, where I say, hey, I'm Shawna and I've known you for 10 years. And, let's talk about what I'm concerned about for you with this is one of the best ways to do it. Because just as we heard with respect to sending an email trying to tell people, listen, this is a problem, and cyber attacks are way on the increase, and they're going to increase even more as people come back to work. People are really not open to hearing that, particularly with their emotional state right now. So I think having those conversations with people in a really caring way is the most impactful thing you can do.
Thank you.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you very much. And Susan, I'd like to just call on you for your question, and maybe you could just give us a quick self-intro before your question.
Certainly. My name is Susan Fulford, and I advise family businesses and family offices across the country. I've had a number of clients actually been held for ransomware and have to deal with that situation. It's obviously not my area of expertise, but are there resources to help families should they find themselves in that position? Usually the timelines are narrow, and usually the payments in Bitcoin. And of course, the first question that gets asked after they pay a ransom for technology is, how much time will they have before it happens again?
Yeah, yeah.
And thank you, by the way, for your time this morning. It's really appreciated.
Oh, thank you. So ransomware is nasty. I mean, there's just no other way around it. It's nasty. So what I would suggest is actually calling the police if they're being held for ransom. A lot of times these attacks are being done by the same groups of people. They're international. So our opportunity to solve those crimes is challenged by the need to do things like mutual legal assistance treaties, which they're not going to get done in time. They're not. But it's really important to report it, to see if there's any evidence that we can obtain from the computer, and to see whether or not it links to international players that we may actually be working on already. So it's very helpful in terms of evidence. And then you need to work with them after the fact to get an upgraded system to try to get the best security they can. Of course, it's really important to do it in advance. But it's the same as residential. People are most likely to buy an alarm system after they've been broken into, because you don't think you need it until you're in the middle of something like that, and it's awful. Emotionally, it's awful. So what I would suggest is if it happens to you, call the police to see whether or not we can leverage any kind of investigation from it that might be worthwhile in terms of evidence. And then also working with them after the fact to try to get them a higher level of security so that they can have some assurance that it won't happen again. I have to tell you, we've seen these even in major and upgraded IT platforms across the city. So nothing is 100%, which is why they need to do things like securing some of their data, not just in an encrypted form, but in a secure area that's not on the computer. They may want to be saving on a hard drive that they take out after the fact, those kinds of things.
I was wondering, I don't want to monopolize your time, but are there any red flags that business operators can look for, or can they do an audit before such an event?
Yeah, so you're best to do an audit in advance to see whether or not anyone's intruded your network already. Usually someone's been in your network and they've been testing it. It depends on how large the system is though. Sometimes it's not worth it, but that is a good way to determine, because if there's already been a breach on your network logs, depending on what it is, you're highly vulnerable for attack in the future, and you need to be switching gears and changing your system protocols.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, Susan, and thanks for that response. Appreciate that. I was going to go to Vince Fong. Vince, you're in the cybersecurity world as well, and just in terms of the systems that you're selling to your clients. Do you have a question or a comment with respect to what Dr. Coxon has said this morning?
Yeah, no, thanks, John, for hosting this, and thank you, Dr. Coxon, for really insightful information. I don't have any specific questions, but I really appreciated both the coverage on the cyber side of things as well as the physical security. And I'm just wondering, how much do you expect the crime to actually cross over from cyber to physical when things start to open up again?
Wow, what a great question. It's really hard to say. I mean, we're seeing a trajectory where things cross over one to the other more and more frequently. So the big opportunity right now, although we're seeing an increase in physical entries in terms of commercial businesses, the increases we're seeing on the cyber side are actually more. They just are, the opportunity is greater there right now. So I think you're going to continue to see that in terms of cyber. And I think actually the physical pieces in terms of opportunity will go down because people will be in those businesses. And then again, as someone else pointed out earlier, now the real opportunity comes with cyber because they'll already have made the intrusions, been in the networks. Like those opportunities will now, I think, create even more of an uptick.
Yeah, and actually as a follow-on question to that, because I also do a lot of talks to educate parents against the cyber threats as well. With all the kids working from home and being on their devices all the time, what sort of things are you seeing as an uptick on cybercrime in that area?
Yeah, we've asked parents to really monitor what their kids are doing, because what we're finding is they're just not, you just can't, you're home 24/7 and kids are of course on their phone, and how are they interacting with everyone they know and love they're doing it remotely because, you know, you can't see them physically. So it's just creating opportunities, again, with things like phishing, with the links, with respect to filling out information online, you know, engaging in games that are actually, it's not really a game, it's an opportunity to get information from people. So those are the kinds of things we're seeing. The phishing stuff is way up because people just have a tremendous opportunity, again, clicking on a link, because you're just physically on your device more, and kids in particular are just not aware of how problematic that can be. So those are the kinds of things we're seeing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because one of the things that we really warn people about is not letting their kids use their work laptops when they're not using it, because you have no idea what the kids are doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know what, it's so true. And it's not just the kids not using your work laptop, but your spouse, your partner, you know, someone else who might be in your home, your parents, who might just, oh, I just wanted to watch this YouTube video that someone told me was really funny. And the next thing you know, they've clicked on something they shouldn't have. And again, when I talk about businesses having protocols, those are the kinds of things that you really need in terms of your procedures, your governance, so that you can tell people they should just not be doing it, because people won't think about it. They think they're being helpful. Why can't mom watch a YouTube video on my computer, right? Like, what's the big deal? Until there's a major issue. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Dr. Coxon.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. And we've got time for one more. We're in a final approach here. We've got like 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So just a quick question and maybe a quick response, Shawna. Paul Gibson, I'm just going to call on you if you've got a quick question for Shawna.
Well, thanks, and thanks, Shawna. Your comments about phishing was what was on my mind, because personally, I got hit with a perfect LinkedIn phish the other day, and by the time I clicked it and realized what I'd done, I went in and checked password. Is there anything new coming out that you're seeing in the phishing world beyond the normal banking and other things we're seeing? Anything that we should be warning our kids and our employees and others about?
What a great question. And the answer is yes. So we're seeing stuff around the CERB in Canada. People getting a link and thinking that they have to fill out information, and people are very stressed. Oh, I missed information when I filled out that form. I must have missed something and not filled it out. Now the government's getting back to me and they're anxious. They need that money. So they're clicking on thinking that they have to enter in information. We're seeing it also around COVID. You know, just things going out saying that you need to share information with your local doctor, your local hospital. People think they're being helpful. People think that they may have been exposed to someone and that they're getting a notification on that, only to find out that it's a phishing link. So stuff that's specific right now to what people are anxious about, which is their health, and anything around the CERB, as well as the typical stuff you've seen in the past, only reorganized around COVID to make it sound like it's a COVID update on your mortgage, because maybe you asked for mortgage relief, right? So people think because it's specific to what's happening right now that it's for them, and they're clicking on it.
Great. Thank you, Shawna. Thanks, Paul, for that question. You know, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so Shawna, we're going to have to wrap there. But I can't thank you enough for being with us today. I mean, we got tremendous value out of your comments, your presentation, and presented so well. And so, want to really thank you on behalf of everybody on the call for you taking the time and sharing the information with us so openly. So, thank you very much for that. And I just wanted to call on Karsten before we do wrap. I've got a couple of final comments, but Karsten, just call on you and maybe let us know a little bit about our next roundtable.
Yeah, certainly. So again, I want to thank CEO Global Network, John and Jen Wilson, for working with us on this, especially Dr. Coxon for launching this series with us for the first time. Thank you very much for the session today. And we're going to be doing another session with a Dr. Eric Jardine, who is an internationally renowned expert on the dark web. So you may or may not know this, but information on pretty much all of us either already is available for sale or will be shortly, with regards to all these hacks that are in there. He's an expert that has been used by various different intelligence agencies, police agencies, etc., solving all sorts of interesting crimes. And we're going to be sending out through John and CEO Global Network when that event is going to be. So keep an eye out for that. Again, when you have a moment, take a look at McKenzieInstitute.com. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Karsten. And I want to thank thank you and thank Brian for, really allowing SEAL Global Network to partner with you on this. It's just fantastic. I just want to mention, this is really, because it's really valuable information, and I want to mention a couple of sessions that we've got coming up this week following this one, and they're very different than this one. But the one we have tomorrow is really featuring Daryl Keyser. He's the CEO of Candy Box Marketing. He's a great guy. He's a digital marketing guru, and we've got a roundtable featuring him tomorrow at 1 o'clock, 1 to 2 o'clock. So I hope you can make that. We've also got Leading in Times of Crisis session on Thursday, and that's 12 to 1. And that's lessons learned from my time with Xerox. And that's featuring Al Varney, who's a group leader with us. And he's, in his career, he was the CEO of Xerox in Europe, president of parts of Xerox in the US, and CEO in Canada. And he's going to talk about lessons that he's learned in times of crisis that can help us through these times. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for being on the call. And once again, Dr. Coxon, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm looking forward to learning more about this down the road. So thanks, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. Take care and be safe. Bye now.